Okay. Um, I need to. Hi, Assemblyman. How are you? You're on mute. Okay. I'm sorry. What did you say?
I say, I guess, people will be coming in. So
Yeah, I figured I'd sign on a little bit earlier since I'm hosting it, and
I did too, just so,
yeah, and I'll wait till it's closer to 11 to live stream,
yes.
and that's it.
But it hasn't started yet, but I'm on the site. We're waiting for more people to arrive, I guess. Probably do.
Hi, Bill.
Hello.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Hello, Bill.
Okay,
How's it going?
very good.
Oh, good.
Busy.
Yeah,
I
tell
don't
me.
know how many calls my office has been getting about this.
Yeah, well, we do too. We do too.
I can believe it
We
because I see it.
we do too. All right. Yeah, nice background so people can have maybe peace. I'll make it a peaceful. I'll make it that God's coming down. Let's see. Let's have God come down. There you go. God will come down and guide us here.
That would be all right, wouldn't it?
Right?
It really has been a problem that the community was not informed. And it's created a big problem because now the issue is inflamed. And once it gets inflamed by not informing the community, that's a terrible mistake. Big,
Yeah, I would
big
agree.
mistake.
Yep, I would agree.
We'll go through it. We have some, we're gonna, as we get everybody on the line, the guys that are folks that are the panelists, the way we'll work is we're gonna let the DHS and the organization, present what their situation is.
Because we need the information. I need the information.
And then we have some points, from the community we've looked up, there's like definitely legal points, that you guys maybe didn't look at. We wanted to make sure that, we have that covered. And then we'll move to the elected officials, comments that they might want to make.
Absolutely.
We may not be on the same page. We may not be on the same page, but I think we should just, just state facts and, our objections. And we don't have to like be, have animus at one another. Okay. I mean, we try to keep it as civil as we possibly can, because I think that's the way we should, the way Community Board 11 does business. So,
Well, good for you. Good for you.
yeah, we may not agree, but we certainly are going to be civil to one
We
another.
certainly
I
have
know
to be
we
civil.
object when it's not civil. Okay. And
Not enough of that going around, is there?
Yeah, no, it's the truth. That's the problem. That's the problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, Lori, let me ask this. Okay, so from the, from the homeless services, who's on from homeless services? Because I can't tell. I know I see the ICL people.
Yeah, I don't see anybody from DHS on yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Morning, everybody.
Hi, Pam.
Good morning. Okay, so that's all we're waiting for, right, Lori?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
No, it's not 11 o'clock yet, so we're a
No,
little
that's what I'm
early.
saying. I know we're just waiting on that. Okay. Because I think I have all the things covered. I just don't see Councilman Traeger on the phone yet. But I think, was he going to be delayed, Marty said?
I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, I think he thought he was going to be delayed a bit. So we'll see.
Was Senator Savino invited? Because she called me
Yeah, I
last
think-
night and said she didn't get the invitation or that she didn't see it yet.
You can send it to her because I know Marty sent it to everybody because it's on
Right,
Justice
so-
District.
Yeah, that's what I told her. And so,
Yeah, we gave it to everybody. So if she needs it, let us know, Bill. If somebody wants to contact her, I'd be happy to.
Bill, I'm here. Bill,
yes.
I'm here. No, not you, the other one.
Meet this Bill, man. Why?
Sorry, 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 Assemblyman.
I guess when you want to get to meet, man, why? It's Bill G. How's that? The Assemblyman gets the credit of just being Bill. How's that?
Well, anyways, I just want to say hello anyway.
Yeah, I'll say hello to you too.
How are you? And Happy
Good.
New Year.
Happy New Year
Happy
to
New
you.
Year, everybody.
Matthew,
Yeah.
are you from DHS? No, you're on mute. You're on mute. Mute.
I should be better by now at doing this. I
Yeah,
still
okay.
somehow am terrible.
Gotcha.
Yes, I'm Matt Board. I'm from DSS. Good to meet you.
DHS. Okay, good. So
I think you're on mute was the most common phrase in 2020.
It looks like it's going for 2021 too.
So far, yeah.
okay, I'm
I
just
don't
gonna
know.
go. All right, so it's 11 o'clock. We have mostly everybody here that.
Okay, let me go live.
Okay, and yeah, I love that you go live because I want to go through some of the ground rules we're gonna follow to keep this on track. You tell me when you're live and then I'll go accordingly. These are the only folks that you see on a screen that can actually converse. But there will be many, many individuals joining us from the public because it's being live streamed. Okay.
Here you
Just to
go.
let you all know, I am not Councilman Traeger. I am Senator Savino.
I see that.
I don't know why it says Councilman Traeger.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
I was going to say, it looks a lot like, Sabine Diane, but I said, I'm not going to say anything. Maybe it's wrong. Well, you know, listen, in this new wave, he might have gone transgender.
Could be.
I haven't seen him in a while.
Usually you can change the, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you can. Yeah, I mean, I can't change mine, so it looks like it's very formal, but that's not.
The host can, whoever the host, wait, hold on.
Yeah, that's okay.
There we go.
I'm also not Sam Miller, but I'll try the name on there. If I figure out how to do that.
We're going to we'll introduce ourselves.
Okay, great.
You can.
There you did it.
Yeah, if you go up to the top, next to where you mute yourself, there's a little 3 dots. Click on that, and there's a draw down that'll allow you to rename the box.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, so Lori, we're ready to go? No, you're on mute, Lori. Lori, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
Bill, give me a minute.
Okay, just give me the signal that we're.
I'm a newbie at going live.
Okay.
And Matthew, are you going to represent the Department of Homeless Services here?
I am in part with I should have some other colleagues also joining me on the call, but yes.
Okay.
So while you're fixing that, I just have to step away for 1 second and just put my phones on mute.
And there's the real Sam Miller.
Yeah.
Well, this meeting's already gone to the dogs.
Ah, very good.
Okay, back. We're ready, Lori. Good? 1 minute, okay. All right. So actually, you know what, when we have the panelists on, while Lori's trying to fix this, I said it before, but let me just go through. So for those that don't know, I'm Bill Guarinello. I'm the chairman of Board 11. Marnie couldn't join us today. She had a death. Her dad passed away, so she's,
Sorry to hear that.
going down to the services today. So you have me. Okay, so one of the things we wanted to do to sort of create some sense of order to this and, you know, to really get accomplished some good dialogue is we'll work it this way. DHS and the agency ICL, they will go first and tell us what their plans are. And even though we have it, you know, in a concise way, whatever way you can do it, why you chose this, why you chose the population. After that, I think the community board has some points that we'd like to deliver, and then we'll turn it over to elected officials if they have any comments. I said this before, I just want to say this again. In Board 11, we always treat everybody civilly. So I will interject if I feel it's getting, you know, it's getting personal. No need to be personal here. No need to name call, whatever. I know that we won't because we're all good people. But sometimes, you know, our excitement gets the best of us. So let's just hear us each side out and hear the situations and talk reasonably.
Bill, we're live.
And we're live now, okay? So I welcome everybody. So we do have this matter before us. It's not officially before us. This is just a meeting that the ICL and DHS has agreed to, because they, at this point, they do not have to come officially before the community board, but we did get a letter and we did get a follow-up information yesterday on the agency that's doing this, that it does have experience in this area. So whoever wants to go first, whether it's DHS or
Sure.
or ICL, you're on the air.
Great. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Matt Borden. I'm an assistant commissioner at the Department of Social Services. I am joined today by a couple of my colleagues. I'd like to introduce themselves at this time. So folks from DSS, can you just identify yourself on the line? Or not. All right. That's fine.
You're it, Matt.
All right. That's it. That works for me. And obviously we're joined by ICL, and I'll let ICL. Do you guys just want to introduce yourselves too before I start ICL then?
And I'm sorry, Matt, I was on mute.
Hi.
My name is Yvonne Ballard. I'm Associate Commissioner with DHS for Shelter Operations. Is
Right.
Yuri or Dion on the line?
Hi, good morning all. Yes, I'm here. I'm the Brooklyn Borough Director for the Department of Social Services.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry. Okay. ICL, would you like to get started?
Sure.
Just introduce yourselves, I'm sorry.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name's David Woodlock, and I'm the CEO at ICL. Pam?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Pam Mattel. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for ICL.
Janine?
I am Dr. Janine Costley. I'm the Senior Vice President for Shelters and Transitional Services at ICL. And Nicole?
Hi, good morning. Nicole Etienne, VP for Government Relations at ICL.
And Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam Miller. I'm the Chief External Relations Officer at ICL.
So that's
Great.
us.
That's great. So we're here today as together, and I think that what would be helpful is maybe I can give some context in terms of where the administration is in terms of regard to homelessness, and then I'd love to turn it over to ICL to talk about their plans for this specific site and their sort of pedagogy and approach towards the work, so you can get to know them a little bit better if that works. All right. So again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Borden. We're here today to talk about a new single adult site that's coming to Bath Avenue, probably not sometime until 2022 for 150 single adults. The administration, this site is actually part of one of 90 new sites that the administration has announced upon in part of our Turning the Tide plan. Just to be very brief, in 2017, we announced Turning the Tide as sort of a comprehensive plan to address homelessness in New York City. The plan had 4 core pillars. We were trying to prevent homelessness whenever we could. We were trying to rehouse families and individuals so we could move out of shelter altogether. We wanted to address unsheltered street homelessness, and also sort of transform the haphazard approach that we had to providing shelter and services that we built up over this last time. Part of this plan was to decrease our footprint by 45% and ending the use of more than 360 cluster style shelters and commercial hotels, while opening up a smaller number of 90 borough-based shelters, which this one would be, across the city. Historically, the city had generally sited shelters in certain communities, and part of this administration's approach to equity and thinking about looking at our system and wanting to make sure that services are provided across the board, and also we could meet individuals who are being homeless wherever their neighborhood is, to try to open up sites in every community district. And at this point, we've announced sites, I believe, on all but 3 community board districts are remaining that don't have an announced site, but obviously those are also in the works. As we go forward, we've been very happy with this plan. Part of it, of course, has been aggressively expanding our free legal assistance for New Yorkers in danger of eviction. We've multiplied that by 20, the amount of money that we're spending on it, from 6 million to 136 million. We've helped drop evictions by 40%. We've helped more than almost 500,000 New Yorkers get free legal representation. And we've also really, in terms of for our work regarding shelters, have really phased out a lot of providers that weren't doing a good job, and really try to figure out, emphasize how to work with partners such as ICL, folks that have long history doing this kind of work, and we know are proven commodities, and also are really want to engage with communities. We've also transformed the way that we announce shelters. So before I started, there was no process at all. A shelter would get announced, and then sometimes as the next day, a site would come in, and that would be it. Obviously, we've tried to give communities at least 30 days notice. In this case, we're talking about more than a year's notice. I think that is really appropriate and important, because obviously we want to hear from the community. We want to hear what folks have to say, and obviously figuring out how we can best work together. So when a nonprofit begins work and starts and opens up, they actually have a good basis of relationships already established, and can make sure that it's a seamless integration. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to ICL to talk a little bit about their own approach and what their plans are for this specific site.
Great, thank you, Matt. As I mentioned, my name's David Woodlock, and very happy, all of us from ICL are very happy to be with you this morning on this freezing cold morning. ICL, I think, is known to some of you. We've had conversations about other services over the years. ICL's about a 35-year-old agency that started with one program in downtown Brooklyn, and over the years has grown and expanded. We're in all 5 boroughs these days. Take care of about 10,000 people in a whole variety of settings across the city every day. And about 2,500 or so people spend the night with us every night in a whole variety of settings, from support in their own homes, in their own apartments, all the way through to a number of homeless shelters. We currently operate 5 homeless shelters and have, I think, quite successfully launched 3 new shelters in the last 2 years. We're very proud of the work that happens in our shelters. I think last year we were able, Janine, please correct me if I misstate this. I think we found homes for about 350 or so people from those homeless shelters into their own homes last year.
That's correct.
Thank you. We run the only homeless shelter for veterans in the city. That is also a very well thought of program serving some of the nation's finest. We have been challenged, like so many other providers have, in moving folks from our congregate sites into hotels or in the COVID era. I am happy to say we did that with a good deal of success and as little disruption to people's lives as we could, and all in all have been quite successful in keeping people safe and healthy in our shelters through a lot of the, I think, pretty extraordinary work that Dr. Costley and her staff have done over the past year. So that's, we've also, in our variety of programs, have won in the last year or two national awards for our health and wellness and our attention to people's well-being from the National Council for Behavioral Health and SAMHSA. So I'm very proud of the work we do. We take very seriously our organizational motto that people get better with us. It's not just a motto, it's an organizing principle for us. And for us, it really is true north. So whatever one of our services people might be getting assistance from us in, it's still about helping them get better and get back on their feet and live a more happy, productive life. So that's a real quick top of the trees overview of ICL. I'll be happy to turn it over to Dr. Costley to let her share a little bit more about how our shelters go about their business.
Well, you know what? I think we basically know about shelters. And maybe if you could just hone it down to, what do you plan for this shelter? What's your vision for this shelter?
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. So the shelter is the Bass Shelter, and the plans, as I think you mentioned, 150 single adults in the shelter. And our shelters have a full array of services for individuals who are working toward better independence and housing. And so this is an employment shelter, actually. It's for single adults, and the clients will be finding jobs or working in jobs. And so our job is really to assist them in finding good housing and independent housing for them. We come with a full array of staffing. We have case managers, we have entitlement specialists, we have employment specialists. We also have a good leadership staff that all work toward helping each client gain some independence, gain sufficiency, and become housed and have their own key for their own place, and live in the community. And so that is our goal for all of our shelters. Right now, we've been doing that successfully for about 850 individuals. And like David said, we've had over 150 housing placements in the past year. And that was in the past year during COVID. It was a challenging year, but we still really did well in housing our housing clients. And that really speaks towards the skills of our staff. And so we really do a good job at that. And
Let me just interrupt you. When you said adults, men only or men and women?
This particular shelter are for men.
Yes, I thought so. I just wanted
single adult men. And that's single adult men age 18 and up.
Gotcha. Okay. So
also,
let me just say this from the community board level. I mean, we certainly are not doing NIMBY here. Okay, by no means are we being NIMBY to say this doesn't belong in the backyard. We don't know if this is the actual right site for this, and maybe I can just bring up some points that maybe you haven't thought about and you probably should think, and maybe DHS should think. The 2147 Bath Avenue, where this is located, is an R5/C12 zoning district. Hotels are not permitted as of right. They're only permitted by special permit. Doesn't mean you can't, but you gotta apply for a special permit. BSNA previously determined that a homeless shelter meets the definition of a transient hotel use group. It's called use group 5, which the New York Appellate Division upheld. If this is argued, in other words, if we argue this point that you say it's not, or DHS says it's not, or they're going to override the zoning, then we as a community board need that in writing, that the mayor or whoever is going to overwrite the zoning, because it's right now seems as if it's in violation of zoning law. And just to tell you what the zoning law defines as transient hotels, living or sleeping accommodations are primarily used for transient occupancy and may be rented on a daily basis. The last part, of course, doesn't count. One or more common entrances serve all living units and sleeping units. Everybody comes in the same way. A 24-hour service desk is provided in addition to one or more of the following services: housekeeping, telephone, bellhop, or furnishing a laundry. And, again, some of it maybe is in there and some of it isn't. If any of these are in the facility, it's not defined as a community facility by zoning. Okay, so you guys need to look into that, because that's one of the arguments that we have, that we don't think that particular site fits the zoning. And that if you still want to pursue it, then you'd have to come before us in a special permit. There's also, we honestly feel, given our community and the way it has expanded, we really have to look at the infrastructure support services for 150 men coming in here and using the community services. As you know, and I'm sure you looked at it because knowing that ICL also does developmental disability services, you know that you have to check on what the saturation is. Well, when you look here, just 2.5 blocks away, we have the King's Adult Care Center, 200 beds are there. The King David Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, 271 beds are there. And the Haim Solomon Nursing and Rehabilitation Center has 240 beds. And there, there's really no as of right to even develop on Cropsey Avenue, which is just a block away. I think the other part is we looked at some of the stats, and we now have in Bensonhurst 1,200 families that are in temporary housing. Families, not men. So we sort of, from a community board perspective, felt that it was sort of misaligned. This should have more been a family shelter if you were going to try to serve our homeless in our community. I mean, these people are in temporary housing. They need to do something. So I'm sure they'd like to come to something like this. So these are the thoughts that we would have in terms of presenting this particular site, not the concept of not having homeless in our area. It's just that we don't know if that site fits, and that if the population you're looking to put here fits. Because we do have other needs, and we'd like to see that done. Before I turn it over to elected officials, I would like to say that any of the public that's listening, if you haven't come in before and you're just coming in, we at the community board, we're just here, the neighbors just like you, so we're just trying to, we're trying to have a dialogue here. But if you keep inundating the community board office, we don't have any more answers than you're going to hear on this today. So if you can, we'll alert the public of all future meetings like this. We've been very transparent, but to call and ask us what's going on, you're hearing what's going on. That's the best we could do. And the poor woman that has to pick up that phone and have no information will frustrate you and certainly frustrates us. So those are just some of the thoughts just from the community board perspective that I thought you folks should think about. Because I'm sure the community, if it's a zoning issue, is going to bring it back to us that the zoning is not being complied with. So what I'd like to be able to do here, and then I guess as everybody gets their thing, it'll give DHS and ICL some time if they want to respond here or want to take it back and then respond. So I don't want to put anybody totally on the spot that they'd have to. Can you hold on, Ed? Ed? So Councilman Traeger is the council person. Seeing that it's a city, I certainly would like to give him the opportunity to speak. And who's ever laughing, can you put yourself on mute? Thank you. Okay, so Councilman Traeger, if you have some questions or ideas, happy to hear you.
Yes, so thank you, Bill, for gathering us here today. I want to thank my colleagues in government, CB11, and all the folks on this Zoom and those who are watching. I do want to just begin by correcting the record as far as, at least with my office, and I'm sure I could speak for my other colleagues as well. Because I had heard Mr. Borden mentioned that that DHS and the city administration is sort of breaking the cycle by giving folks significant notice. There was no consultation with my office, and I am pretty certain there was virtually no consultation with other offices and the community board. The consultation, so to speak, was a phone call that there's going to be a meeting about a shelter location that was already selected in CB11, not asking us whether the location fits, not asking us about, as Mr. Guarnello mentioned, about zoning issues or types of social infrastructure. So to me, the best decisions are always the most informed decisions. And I think that that's a lesson that we could all learn from this past year as well. But there certainly was not sort of consultation with stakeholders. And quite frankly, I am very empathetic, sympathetic, and compassionate as a former public school teacher who served children in temporary housing. These are our families, these are our folks. No one disputes this, but I do think that you set this off on the wrong foot when there's virtually no communication, no consultation with stakeholders. I want to harp on a point that Mr. Guarnello mentioned, because this was something that I want to raise, particularly in the moment that we are in. I know about King's Adult Care Center, which is nearby this facility. And I remember hearing this very similar presentations with regards to the social infrastructure and support services. I know folks that had to be hospitalized because there was inadequate support. I know I used to live near there where folks would routinely, let's just say, not get help and support that they need, and they would end up having to be arrested because the police classified them as EDPs. And there were folks that literally, and these are residents, these are human beings, but they were not being serviced, they were not being helped, they were not being supported. And I would sometimes get phone calls about folks that just needed extra help that, quite frankly, the facility was not providing. Nearby, we have facilities that, let's just say, were a part of the Attorney General's report about undercounting deaths and people that were impacted by COVID. I went through this personally when we got calls, frantic phone calls from relatives and loved ones that folks were getting sick and there was staff shortages. And I was told everything was fine, everything was okay, only to see refrigerator trucks on Cropsey Avenue by many of these facilities because they could not keep up with the amount of people that were getting sick and unfortunately passing away. So I share this with you because trust is broken. There is not adequate trust in terms of adequate social infrastructure to support people. These are human beings. I'm very, very understanding of this. I don't think, as Mr. Guarnello talked about, a case of NIMBY, there is a saturation of high need population in this community, and these are our neighbors, these are our residents, but they are not being adequately served right now. And so I share this because, number one, there already was not consultation. Number two, I worry about the inadequate social service infrastructure already in this area that folks might not realize, and I don't know if you count this in terms of your equity analysis, but we have a number of state licensed facilities in this area. As mentioned, King's Adult Care, Haim Solomon, King David, not too far away is Garden of Eden, and other facilities where folks already as is are not getting the type of support that they need. And I have to feel the number of phone calls, quite frankly, very often about the inadequate services and people ending up, people on 86th Street ending up laying on the ground because they're not getting the help and support. So I just want to begin by sharing that. And I want to ask a question to ICL because my understanding of how this works, and folks can correct me for the record, is that the nonprofit partner or the organization usually partners with some sort of a developer or someone to identify a site. And there's a question here, I think that Mr. Guarnello mentioned with regards to the zoning, which we still have to resolve. But my question is, who is technically building this? And when did you first know about this site being available where you wanted to advance this project?
To answer at least the second part of that, we responded to a request for proposal.
And when was that request for proposal issued?
Pam, do you recall the timing of that?
Sure. And Matt, perhaps you can also provide a little bit more detail on the DHS process. But in answer to your question, Councilman, DHS approached ICL. They had already identified a potential builder. And so our response was directly to DHS that we were interested and willing nonprofit provider to help.
And who is the builder?
I'm only hesitating, I apologize, because the builder legal name might be different than the two gentlemen that I spoke to.
Can you give us any names, any information?
If you give me a moment while we go on, I will just go back and verify. So I will come back.
And Councilman, just more process-wise, because I think that's at least part of your question, this was not a project where a developer came to us or we sought out a developer to move forward with the project. We responded to provide services in response to an RFP, and the development aspects of that were much already in place.
So what you're saying, let me ask this.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little familiar with this process myself personally. You were given the site, said this is the site. You were given
Correct.
From the city, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So it was already, Mark, to answer your question, it was already a site that the city had determined they were going to use. They just went to ICL as the provider.
And that just speaks to the fact that the city administration, DHS, did not have any consultation with any of the official stakeholders to say, let's maybe find a site that is suitable in terms of adequate social infrastructure. And because there was none. I could speak for my office, there was none. And I'm pretty sure my colleagues will say the same. That does worry me, folks. And I, as chair of the education committee, know firsthand about the inadequate number of social workers that our children in many shelters also have. So no one's going to lecture me about adequate social support services when many of our kids fall through the cracks in the school system because of inadequate social support services. But this is an area that literally, and that's why, Mr. Woodwalk, I'd appreciate if you could respond to this. When you responded to the RFP, what kind of analysis does your organization do in terms of the social fabric infrastructure? Because yes, it's critically, these are human beings, these are residents, but the community around them is also very important in terms of making sure that there's adequate social support services for folks. Can you speak to what analysis that your organization did, whether or not the social fabric infrastructure is adequate to meet their needs?
Let me answer sort of tops of the trees a little bit, and then Janine, you can speak to how we interplay in the shelters we already run, I think, pretty successfully. So we have been very successful, I have to say, which I appreciate doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be 100% successful in another one, and every context is different, and I appreciate that. We are in a number of different areas of the city. The way that the programmatic resources have been developed in our existing shelters, it was really reflected in the RFP that we submitted. Based on our success, we have engaged always with community advisory boards, and each of our shelters engages, I think, very actively with the local community. I have to say there's been great success, as I said, 3 in the last 2 years, without I'd have to say any of the kind of things that you were describing, Councilman.
Hey, Mark, if I could just jump in here so we don't elongate the time with the agency. Just from a point of view, the agency, just so people would know and the public would know, the agency responded to an RFP. All of the particulars were there already. The site, in other words, all the demographic studies were done. They're just responding to an RFP. So if we're going to really ask, I think it goes back to DHS. What was their process? Because the agency just responded to, this is the site. They don't have a choice in the site. They get the site.
Well, so, I'll tell you why I asked, Bill.
Okay.
Because in Coney Island, we are, there's a facility being built, almost ready, almost built by WIN. And it seems that the process was almost in the reverse there, because WIN worked with a developer and found a site. Also, again, not much community consultation, but it's already being built. And they built it next to car wreckage shops. Let me repeat this one more time for folks. They're building a family, women and children shelter next to a bunch of car wreckage shops where you have junk cars by Neptune Avenue. And you're trying to convince me that this is adequate social infrastructure? So that's why, I have a little bit of experience where on the flip side, there was, so let me ask the question to DHS. What brought you to this location and what analysis did you conduct to determine that this was a suitable location? And again, be mindful of this equity argument, because this is an area that already has a number of state licensed facilities that are supposed to serve people, but as the AG report just issued yesterday, let a lot of people down. So can you please just share what brought you to this location?
Sure. So we have sites across the city in every single kind of neighborhood. We actually don't think that there's any inappropriate place to put a homeless shelter. So in this situation,
Mr. Borden, that's not what I said. Mr. Borden, please don't put words in my mouth.
I'm answering your question.
No,
A developer brought us. I'm answering your question.
But that was not my question, Mr. Borden.
What's your question? You're saying, how do we select this site?
My
I'm telling you
question
that
is,
a developer brought us to this site.
Right, but I did not say I am talking about adequate social fabric, social support services for people, because they're human beings. And I see what already is happening. I see what is already happening in the neighborhood with state licensed facilities that are failing to meet the needs of people, where people died, Mr. Borden. So that's why I'm very sensitive to this topic.
I would first of all just separate the conversation you're having about state licensed facilities where people died versus what we're doing here, which is as a social service agency creating a homeless shelter for single adult men. So I don't think it's quite fair to actually conflate the two, because they're completely different services.
Mr. Borden, we're serving high need populations, and they are human beings. And
absolutely,
with all due respect, we were told the same things from different providers that we're going to meet their needs. So first of all, that's terrible. As a human being, anyone that is experiencing suffering is terrible. So I'm really sorry that those situations are happening. I agree.
I can't. I think it's also, I don't know those organizations. I don't know what they are. I'm merely trying to sort of just describe the process that we had.
Please
and
do.
So in terms of just, we have, developers, we've sort of put out a broad call to open up sites all across.
He froze. So while he's unfreezing,
Asked ICL if they would be interested with this to have this site, and ultimately they came back and linked up with the developer and had a proposal which ultimately passed. Before we can open this site, we do have to do an environmental impact assessment to make sure that it's appropriate. And in addition, in terms of, to answer your other question, we are at the very beginning stages of this. So we're trying to have this community conversation now. I wasn't trying in any way to insinuate that there have been, previous conversations, because there haven't been. I was merely saying previously, not only in other administrations, not only was there no conversations regarding where sites should be, but there also was no notification, so communities could even begin to have conversations around it. And I'm sorry, ICL, did you have something you wanted to add? I didn't want to, I don't know if I missed that.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Just regarding the services, I think possibly one of the reasons why DHS picked us for that RFP is because we do internally have these services that can support clients that live in our shelters. We have a whole array of services within ICL. We have a partner called CHN. We have clinics. We have entitlement services. We have employment services. We have PROS programs. We have a whole array of services that support our clients on site, which is located right in Brooklyn. So our service, it's a direct link to services, as well as the services that we would provide on site. So any client client that might need medical services or mental health services or employment services or any array of supportive services, we have that directly with our organization, as well as what is on site. So I just wanted to point that out as being a partner in the community, that we provide these services in Brooklyn, not only for our clients who live in shelter, but for individuals in Brooklyn, anybody who can partake in these services as well.
And Ms. Costley, are you serving like a special population here as far as like to what level of need are we talking about?
These, the clients that would live in this particular shelter are single adults, and it's an employment shelter for men. And so these are individuals who are working and who are looking to work, and that we're assisting with helping them gain that independence. We have all of the services on site to assist in that process. And the clients, in this system, in order to get even the help and the vouchers, clients have to work. And so we're really working toward a system where clients are working every day, and we're supporting them in that process. We're supporting them with also clothing and shoes, and just helping them have interview skills and helping them get to work every single day. And so that's our charge in providing these services in that community.
And Ms. Costley, and I appreciate that answer. And in addition to being homeless, which is a significant barrier, are there any other barriers that you know of about that they face in terms of gaining or retaining employment?
Well, I think one of the barriers in gaining and retaining always is being able to get to work appropriately. So when a person is homeless, they have a really difficult time. You know, they have to get there at a certain time. They have to have the appropriate clothes. They have to be clean and appropriate to get to work. And so we supply that framework for them to achieve that. And so when you're not street homeless, you're able to organize around a shower every day. You're able to organize around where your clothing is going to be and how it's going to get washed. We have washer and dryers on site that can help clients just maintain their cleanliness and maintain, just their just everyday living needs. And so we supply all of those things. And so that assists these clients in just retaining the normalcy of an everyday schedule, getting to work, getting breakfast in the morning, getting a bag lunch when they go, coming back and getting dinner in the evening, coming in, getting a good night's sleep and going back to work the next day. And all the while we have housing specialists that are assisting them in finding apartments in the different neighborhoods of New York City. So we have all of those things. And we also have the leadership staff that are credentialed. We have LCSWs, LMSWs in our leadership staff that also assist in this process in helping clients. So I feel like we have a really good framework on-site and off-site to help clients.
Just quick follow-ups, and then I'll turn it to my colleagues. You mentioned 150 single men. I'm curious to know how many full-time social workers and other support staff will be on there. And also another barrier to employment that I know very well that I've been working on with my colleagues to address is folks who are justice involved. If you could speak to that as well.
Mm-hmm. So we do have employment specialists, entitlement specialists, and we do have staff that work in the justice community for clients who might be on probation, clients who might have those barriers, and we help clients with those barriers achieve housing. We have a employment program within ICL that also helps in that process.
We also, Councilman, also have a supported housing program that is uniquely designed for people coming from the criminal justice system. So the staff associated with that, it's not part of this particular program, but another program that we run. The staff are all very familiar with all of the nuances and the legal issues in probation and parole and all the rest of those kinds of things that potentially is an outlet for the shelter.
And I'll tell you, Mr. Woodlock, I appreciate your attention to veterans. Like my office in partnership with Senator Savino, we helped establish permanent affordable housing for homeless veterans on Surf Avenue.
Yep.
Permanent home with on-site support services for them because I do think permanent affordable housing really is the answer. But
Me
just
too.
no one answered my question with regards to how many full-time social workers will be on site.
Thank you. So, so according to our RFP and the staffing pattern, we have clinical positions for LCSW's clinical staff in our leadership position. So it would be about 3 people that we would hire that have credentials of mental health in a mental health capacity.
But
That's not what I
Janine,
asked, Ms. Costler.
Yeah, Janine, do you want to like round it out? And I think I understand, Councilman, what you're asking, because there's a full array of staff. And we could say, yes, there are X number of social workers, but they are also complemented by caseworkers that are trained, by a nurse, by operations staff, by security staff. So there is a multidisciplinary team. I do think it's important. We could focus on one particular to answer that question, but our approach is really from a team-based.
Well, but if someone can give me the direct number, how many full-time licensed social workers will be working at this location?
So I have one other piece. I'm not hedging on your question. The budget has only been drafted and sent to DHS. So that still needs to be negotiated out. That is not even close to being reviewed. I do think hearing the concern that this is something that DHS and ICL can continue to talk about. What is the
Given your expertise, let's do this.
appropriate
I'm
staffing?
a little familiar with social services, okay? What are you going to ask for? You may not get it, but what do you think the site requires in terms of social services? Because I know the way budgets work, with you ask for 5, you get 2. So, my point is, what do you think, given your experience in the field of doing this before, what works in terms of social work, so you can answer the councilman's question? What do you think works? Not what you're going to get. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, well, as a licensed social worker, I'm an advocate for the field, and I'm just happy to see social workers in all shelters. But I definitely hear you, Councilman, about your ask about how many social workers will be on site. And as Pam said, that's something that we take into consideration, and that we'll continue working out with DHS so that we are able to have the most appropriate amount.
We don't belabor this point because I know you don't have the answer right now. It's something to get back to us on, okay? Because I don't want to just keep on running down this road.
But I have to just say for the record, and again, this is very personal for me, being a teacher and education chair, and I fight like hell to get social workers in schools.
Right.
It is inconceivable to me that we could even discuss serving folks who particularly are facing trauma, high needs in many areas of their lives, and we're not even sure or guaranteed or have any clarity on full-time social workers who are, and I appreciate, Ms. Costa, you being one, because I value social workers immensely, but you are licensed and trained and credentialed to provide direct services, therapeutic services to folks in need. And that makes a difference.
Right, certainly.
So, Janine, let me respond to that. So I think it's important to keep a context for this. And again, we'll flip through the RFP and get you a very concrete answer back. That being said, I don't want to gloss over something that Janine mentioned earlier. We have connections. We run mental health clinics. If people need mental health care, they can get mental health care from our clinics. And that's not necessarily tied to the social work staff that are physically located on the site. If people have substance abuse issues, we can treat them in our outpatient clinics. If they need additional case management services or ACT team services, assertive community treatment teams, we have 6 of those and can provide services to people located in our shelters. So the issue of the system of care that is sort of behind these individual shelters that allows us to provide a lot of additional services and supports to the individuals in our shelters goes considerably above and beyond the number of FTEs, and we'll get you the answer to your question.
But Mr. Rourke, in closing, the way I'll respond to that is that that sounds very similar to when the city administration tried to convince me that Thrive services for school children were sufficient. Referring our kids out somewhere else or to call 311 did not work. What works is having full-time social workers in our schools and also on site. I'm gonna pause here. I have some more follow-up, but I'm mindful of questions, Bill. Thank you.
I think what I want, and again, if any of the elected officials or whatever, I think even after this, you should get whatever questions that you haven't thought of or we couldn't get out today. Now, I'm going to give priority to the elected officials that are in the catchment of this particular site to speak. But what I'm going to ask is what I normally do at community boards. Let's ask something new, okay? So if it's been covered by Mark, then we don't have to add to it, okay? So I'm going to ask Councilman Colton if he'd like to come up with anything new that we haven't really fleshed through yet.
Yes. First of all, I want to say very clearly that I have requested a public hearing be held on this issue, and this particular conversation doesn't qualify as a public hearing. The public has to have a right to be hearing what's going on, what are the details, what are the specifics, and they have to have a right to ask questions. And without that, this is destined for failure. So I think that becomes an important prerequisite in terms of, how to proceed here. I also, want to indicate that this is not an NIMBY situation. I am also a former teacher. I've been active in the community, an environmentalist, an elected official, and I am concerned about homeless people. I want to see them get the services and the help that they need. But I am also aware that shelters have, generally speaking, been rejected by homeless people themselves. They don't want to live in a shelter. They want to have a home. And I know there's a tremendous amount of money being spent on so-called homeless shelters that the constituency, the homeless people themselves, do not think is a solution to their problems. They do not want to live there. Now, we have a number of, and I would just associate myself with the zoning issues that were raised by our chair here of CB11. And, I'm not going to go into that any further. But there are a number of questions that I do have. This particular neighborhood is a residential area that has a number of institutions that are already existing in it, that are providing, and we're talking about, some of them were mentioned, King's Rehab and Heim Solomon, and there's many of them in the area within blocks of this particular location. But what I hear here today is that there's very general statements about how services are going to be provided to the 150 men, and this is only limited to men. We have many homeless families. This is not helping them. This is not serving them. As I understand it, this is 150 single men that this shelter will be eligible for. And I don't, hear what services are going to be provided. I expect to hear that in the future. If you seriously want to have a successful homeless shelter in this neighborhood, understand we are not going to accept generalities. When I hear people talk in global terms, there's lots of services available. We have various services available in various places, and they can be, we can refer people to them and they can be utilized. Well, if somebody is if you're saying everybody is available, if they're not assigned to that particular center and they're not present, nobody is available. So we also want to say, we want to know who is available. I'm interested in, I believe that this shelter does not allow residents to remain in the shelter during the daytime hours. And I want to know if that in fact is true, because that's the rule in many shelters. Are residents going to be allowed to remain in daytime hours? And specifically, what services are you going to provide for the time the residents are put out on the street? That's one of the reasons why homeless people don't like shelters, because they can't stay in them when they don't feel well. They can't stay in them when they want to watch some program on television or do some activity or just rest. They have to leave the shelter. They have to be put out on the street. And when they're on the street, what guarantee or assurances do you have that you have services in place as to where they can go, what they can do in those hours that they are not allowed to remain in the shelter? And again, if you talk in generalities, oh, there's lots of things that we can do, that means you have nothing specifically assigned to do, as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as the community is concerned.
Let them answer. Let them answer.
Let me just answer that.
Yeah, please, thanks.
There's a serious misnomer that clients are not allowed in the building during the day hours. I can assure you that there's no truth to that. Our clients are allowed in the building 24/7. The only difference I think that people mistakenly say is that the clients at times may have to leave their room area so it can be clean, but no client is put out in the streets during the day or the evenings at all. So let me just clarify that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. And I do want to say,
very important.
Okay, so that is throughout our shelter system, not just this site. And I do want to say that ICL is a very strong provider with us. We collaborate. They have a list of staff, like I know you're asking for specific titles, but you can't just list or ask for specific titles. Like Pam mentioned, you have clinical staff, but you also have case managers that are specifically trained in how to do crisis intervention. You have drug and alcohol staff members that are there to assist and to provide the services on site. Are they on site 24/7? No, they're not. They're on site during hours, and we encourage our providers to provide these services across 7 days a week during staggering hours to ensure that we capture those clients that need the services. So if you're out there, the client is working 9 to 5, they can come in at 7 or 8 o'clock and still be able to see staff and be able to get the services that they need.
Okay, thank you. So
Yeah,
Bill, you
what
have
I
anything
would
else?
just like to say, though, is, again, this community demands facts and specific information. We are not going to rely upon promises that may never be obtained, may never be followed up. We want to have specifics. There have to be services that we know are going to be provided day to day. We need to know that there are going to be personnel that can deal with the problems that will exist in that center. And we want to know how many and how much is budgeted for that. Without that information, it's just promises that are out there that we probably will never really see come into fruition. This is a community that wants to know specifics.
I think we'll get those specifics. I think Mark asked, so you're asking for the same thing. Is there anything else you want to bring up before I move on?
Just that, I'm disappointed that the community hasn't been reached earlier, because we might have provided some assistance even in terms of other areas where you might have been able to, or other kinds of shelters. But that's where we're at now. This is what you're presenting. We want the facts. We want specific guarantees in terms of what you're going to do. And then the community is going to have its decision, and its decision, I will support it all the way. And so you have to come up with the goods to show that this is something that is good for the people that you're serving, because we need to do things for homeless people. It's got to be for their good, and it's got to be for the good of the community, not causing problems in the community.
Diane or Senator Gennardis, who would like to go? Diane,
I'll go. Yeah, I'll go. So first of all, Bill, I want to thank you for pulling this together so quickly. I'm not going to reiterate a lot of the comments that Mark and Bill Colton have raised, but I just want to focus on a few points. So this particular location, Bill, you made some really interesting points about the particular zoning issue. So this may actually be a moot issue, right? Whether or not they can build on this. I want to go back to, though, the way this particular location was chosen. I know ICL's work. Before my career in the Senate, I was in the social service field. 30 years ago, I started as a caseworker in HRA before DHS was created. I know the shelter system well. I know it in its ugliness and in the way it's improved over the years. But citing shelters in communities is always difficult. Nobody wants one. We are all compassionate people, though. We don't want to see people in the street. We want to see families housed. But the way this administration has gone about it has created all sorts of problems. It's one of the reasons why last year, the Senate and the Assembly got together and passed a bill that requires a public hearing be held in communities to provide the information so that people know when a shelter is going to be sited. Unfortunately, that bill doesn't take effect until later this year. The governor signed it. So in the future, the Department of Homeless Services and shelter operators will be required to do exactly what we're doing now, have that public hearing that Bill Colton wants. What you're doing today, though, we appreciate it, but it's kind of like the horse is out of the barn. But I want to ask Matt, this is an interesting way this one was done. It appears to me that the person who owned the property was either approached by DHS to buy it so that you could then give it to a shelter operator, or the other way around. Maybe the property owner decided not to develop his own property and then said, maybe the city wants to buy my property. Is that how it happened?
So yes, well, the city doesn't buy any properties, but in this
So who
case,
owns the property right now?
I don't know who the developer is. Yeah, it's not a secret. I just don't know who it is.
Matt, she's asking if it's a
What's that?
land lease or is it going to be a lease?
So the city doesn't have any. The city doesn't transfer. There's no funds that transfer from the city to the property owner. The way that these situations work is that.
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. The way the situation works is that if there's a site that an interested party wants to use to help for these services, we're approached the city. Sometimes, as the councilmember talked about before, a nonprofit will work on their own with a developer. Sometimes developers bring sites to us. We've been very sort of open and honest that about the need for sites. So in this case, they approached us. We determined that that in terms of a possible service provider for ICL, and then at that point, ICL then works with the developer to come up with a proposal to make sure they have site control. If it has to be a match between them, and then they present a proposal to us, which we then determine if we can be approved or not.
Yes.
And maybe Dave, you're going to chime in here. So they get the contract, they work with the developer. And so either they're leasing from the developer, they're not going to buy it because the guy wants to get paid in perpetuity. Right. So ICL is going to pay him a rent that DHS is going to approve. Does that answer
exactly? And that's exactly, and ultimately it has to be a rent that gets approved by OMB.
Yeah, you have to approve.
So then the next question is, once DHS was approached by this developer that I have this property, and then you determined that it would be a good site to help fill the turning the tide, process of building the 90 homeless shelters that the commitment to in 2017. Then you approach ICL, you have this RFP, which is an open-ended RFP to build shelters, right? Because we want to get them built. Why choose a single men's shelter? Why not a family shelter? Why not a supportive housing program as opposed? Why decide that one?
Yeah. So
did you guys pick the RFP that they applied for?
Yeah. It really comes down to what the capacity. I mean, this is something where I've been unable to sort of avoid. It's not me, but the city has been unable to avoid in terms of trying to, as we go forward, is figuring out how do we meet our legal mandate to house people that need shelter. And we've actually seen a decrease in the number of people that are in shelter. So at one time during this administration, that number was close to about 60,000, that there were folks that were close to 60,000 in shelter. That number now has dropped to about 54,000. And the largest drop that we've seen has been families with children. So we've actually, and so part of that goal that we've had is how do we, again, exit families with children from all sort of kinds of situations which are really inappropriate, like commercial hotels. On the other hand, we've seen a continued increase in the number of single adults who are entering the system. So that's ultimately why, when we're talking about sites now, why we're talking, about single adult sites, because ultimately when we're looking at how do we make sure that everyone has a bed, that's where the need is.
But single adults, as you know, are usually the most complicated population to serve in the shelter system. So the concern I have as someone who worked in the social service field is 150 men who may have been homeless for a longer period of time, some of whom, as Mark suggested, may be justice involved, many of them whom probably have mental health issues, maybe also social substance abuse disorder, a combination of the two. We're going to have a concentration of them in a community that is already oversaturated. And I'm just concerned that you have too many in this one area, and how are we going to serve them? I know you're not going to have, all the social workers you want. And even if you did, you're not going to be able to serve them all. I believe that this location is inappropriate, number one. But number two, I think it's too big. And so I'm just concerned if you're going to have, I know in shelters you can't smoke anymore. Unfortunately, we know far too many people still smoke. How are you going to manage, let's say half the people go outside every now and then to sit outside and smoke at night. How are you going to manage that? How many people will be there overnight? How many workers are going to be there? How are you going to handle security? I mean, this is going to be a major concern. This is a pretty big facility we're talking about.
Sure. So, and I'm happy to, I think some of those questions ICL should answer. I think the good thing about now in terms of starting the process early, and I know again, with the caveat on being understood that it doesn't feel early because it feels like the decision was made already. So I appreciate that. But obviously there is a difference in terms of having these kinds of conversations to hear those kinds of concerns. Now, for there will be outdoor space for this site. I don't know in terms of if ICL, what conversations they've had with the developer, but obviously that outdoor space, would obviously be a roof outdoor space or a backyard outdoor space. But it's important that when we have sites that we can build that in, to your point, because there are some people that do smoke. Pam, do you have more details about that?
I do.
I'll ask them in a minute. There's one thing I want to ask you guys though, because you put out the RFP. So we know it's 150 single men. Some is they have to be employed or seeking employment, right? So was that written?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a general population site. So we definitely will have, folks there that are employed or, seeking employment.
And if they don't seek employment, will they be required to leave, or will you make them?
No, I mean, no, of course not. That's not. I mean, ultimately, the kind of services that we can ask people to leave sites, and that happens if they don't abide by what's known as a good neighbor policy, which is exactly what it sounds like, just like anybody, like a condo policy or anything else, right? If that's not happening. And then if they're not trying to actively seek services within the system, and it appears that this is not a good fit for them, then of course we would transfer them to another place. But we can't, as a city, mandate them to actually get the services that are offered.
And then the last part for DHS, and then I'll ask ICL questions about the facility that they were proposing to put there.
Yeah.
Is there a prohibition on sex offenders?
So so this site is within 1,000 feet of a school. So we could not have any sex offender that was staying here that had any kind of residency restrictions. I know, I sadly, I know far too much about this issue just because it's something that's always comes up. And my understanding is that there are some people that have been committed of crimes that are allowed to live anywhere. They could stay here, but if the state says you can't stay here, then they're not going to be here.
Okay, thank you. So now for ICL, and I won't take up too much more time because I know the others want it. This is not going to be like apartments. These will describe the living facility if it's built out. What would be the residential rooms like? Would they be shared rooms? Would it be dormitory like? Can you give me a description of what it would look like?
Yeah, I think, let me just jump in quickly, and then Janine, you can provide some of the details. So one of the key things, and DHS knows this as well, is that ICL has certain requirements for our facilities, and that it's to responsibly house people with an enormous amount of dignity and respect. So the requirements that we have are given to the developer, and of course, listening to the community concerns is important because we can also augment what we're sharing with the developer. One is backyard outdoor space so that there's no congregating out in the front. That we understand to be a good neighbor anywhere, you need, even if you're in your own personal house, right? You need backyard space so that you can have recreation and allow other people their privacy. So that's one really important. The other is a home-like atmosphere for meals. So there will be a dining room, there will be social activity room space. And the way that we are starting the conversation dormitories is certainly not open floor dormitories, but to ensure that, again, that there's privacy and dignity. So perhaps there will be 2 people in a room. Maybe there might be a room that might have 3 people. Having sufficient amount of bathrooms on each floor is important so that people can get in and out of bathrooms and not feel that they're waiting online. And then downstairs, there will be a nice entrance. There will be staff offices there. We're also talking about having an exam room so that we could have a part-time nurse potentially there as well. So that when you walk in, you have access to a lot of the services that people have expressed as really very important to this particular program.
All right, did I have anything else?
And that was, that pretty much covered it. Also just wanted to add that there'll be a sufficient amount of recreation space inside of the shelter as well, where there's TV rooms where people can sit and talk and relax outside of their own dorm room. And of course, a backyard to use for recreational space and for clients who do smoke. So they won't be loitering in front of the building or on the corners or either corner. And at all of our shelters, our clients sign good neighbor agreements when they come into the building, and we work with them ongoing in adhering to that as well.
So
I think the final question I have,
I'm sorry, Diane.
do you have another shelter? ICL run another shelter like this somewhere?
For men.
For men. Yes, where's it located?
Well, we have our Borden Avenue Veteran Shelter, and that is a men's shelter. It's 254 individuals. And we also opened a shelter called the Elder Lane Shelter, which I believe is, I think, a little construction-wise, a little bit more similar architecturally to how this building would be in Bath. So we kind of idea of what we want the building to look like and the rooms and how we want the setup, and we're working with the architecture to ensure that that happens.
Because you had said you were in all 5 boroughs, but I don't believe you're in Staten Island.
Shelters are not in Staten Island. No,
Right.
Supported housing.
Right, you
and,
have supportive housing here.
They're a multifaceted agency. They're not just
Right.
they're not just homeless agency.
No, I mean, I will certainly, look, I've raised my concerns about, I think the location is poorly chosen one, but you didn't pick the location. That's DHS problem. And we're going to continue to pursue that with the community board. But I will consult with Matt, listen, we'll discuss this offline, but I will consult with my colleagues in the areas where you do run the single men's shelters to see what the track record is there, because I think that's also an important component. You know, are you a good neighbor? You know, some people are in this business for the right reason, and some, and you know, amongst your colleagues in the shelter business, some people aren't, and I think that's important. So
there's no dispersion, and I know what Diane's saying. There's no dispersion here at ICL.
Right.
But remember, given a population you're going to have to take.
Right.
Okay, we don't have 150 homeless men in Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, Sunset Park, Borough Park. There's not 150 men that need it. So we'll be getting them from all parts of the city.
Right.
Okay. So
I also just want to mention that we have done really well with in our community in the area of the Borden Avenue Veteran Shelter. They've been very supportive of us. They've given us grants. They've supplied shoes and clothing. We've had really good relationships with them. We attend the community board meetings. We recently got a really nice grant from them to put filters in our hotels.
But the Borden area shelter, what's around it?
Nothing. That's Long Island City. It's by the Midtown Tunnel.
When you look at it, we gave DHS, by the way, a place to go in Bensonhurst, you know, as an alternative. They said they couldn't make any deals there, but that would be somewhat better for 150 men. It's near your 62nd Street site where you have your program there. So in terms of this, I don't think it was well thought out, but that's neither here nor there. It's a dialogue we have to have. And if it's going to come here anyway, we need to be able to ensure all the things we're asking for. but there's a lot of hurdles right now that we went through. So Mark, before I call on you, because you are the 3 elected officials that represent this area, but I don't want to close out anybody else that is an elected official that wanted to add, not just agree. So hearing none, then Mark, you can go.
Thank you, Bill, and I thank Diane and Bill for their comments as well. I just, there are reasons why we're raising the other nearby adjacent facilities, institutions, because I think I heard Matt talk about the issue of equity at the beginning of his remarks. We are serving high need populations in our community. And to note, when I get a phone call about someone who is in high need that needs help and support, the person is not saying, hey, get rid of them. They're not saying, hey, shut that place down. They're saying, why aren't they being helped? Why aren't they being serviced? Why are they laying on the street? Why are police having to respond to people suffering from emotional distress? Those are the calls that I get. And so this is a neighborhood that is certainly, I would say, shouldering the burden, just like other parts of the city. And there is a saturation at this location. And I'm going to respectfully disagree with the previous speaker who said that maybe titles don't matter. They do. If you are sick, you want to go to a licensed doctor to get help. If you want your child to get an education, you go to a licensed teacher to get an education. When it comes to folks who are dealing with trauma, and being homeless is very traumatic. I don't have to tell people on the Zoom, and they might have experienced other trauma in their lives. Having adequate and full-time access to therapeutic services is critically important. That's why I fight like hell for more supports in schools, not to call 311 for a referral, not to have, the DOE also gives me what's called a community mental health consultant and a response team. But Lori Windsor could tell you who's on this call, none of them are licensed to provide any direct services to kids, not one. They keep referring them to other people. That's not how we treat human beings who are in need. And so the fact that DHS, and this is my response to DHS, you have an obligation not just to simply place people somewhere, you have an obligation to make sure that we're meeting their needs. And from what I'm hearing on this Zoom call, that hasn't been ironed out yet. So I am very concerned about what type of support services will even be available to folks, because it is not enough to simply give them a bed and give them a meal and give them a key. That's not how this works, folks. These are human beings. And so I want to just respond to the equity issue. I want to respond to the fact that we're serving high need folks who already are not being adequately served. I'm worried about the lack of social supports within this site. And I want to just, again, reiterate the point that this is a community that stands to work with you, because I don't think that this location is a suitable fit, because it's already not working for the other institutions. And to place 150 high need individuals who need a lot of help and support, and they're human beings, they're just not going to get it. From what I'm hearing here today, it's just not going to happen. So I would like to work with my colleagues and DHS and the administration on finding a location that I think has more adequate supports, and also, quite frankly, in compliance with zoning regulations. And Bill Guarnello, I'd like to follow up with you on that as well.
So we've given you a lot of food for having to get back to us on things, and especially the zoning is going to be the top issue.
Yeah.
Because you don't have an as of right. And again, if you think you do, we need that in writing, because I'm sure the community at large will pull an Article 78 and say that you don't, because the Court of Appeal said that it doesn't work. Doesn't mean you still can't move this forward. I mean, from a community perspective, you could still go here. You just have to go through another process, and that process will be a special permit, which will mean that will trigger community board approval, and that will trigger public hearings. Okay, so I think you should go back to the well, find out, what your position is going to be on the zoning, because that's the most important issue. And I think, listen, it's already well down the road. I know how RFPs work, because I've worked with them over the years. You already decided this is 150 men. I mean, we would have liked to have convinced you to move it to a family shelter, which I think would have been more appealable to the folks here. But it is what it is in terms of that. But I'd like you to take all of what we said into account. When you think you're ready to respond to us, in other words, collectively, whether it's ICL and DHS, let us know. We'll form this again, and you'll give us your answers.
Sure, and I just would like to say that I just want to thank you, especially Bill, for leading this meeting. I feel, I'm sorry, there's apparently construction that's happening right now.
That's okay.
There's obviously these are never easy issues to talk about, and I do appreciate everyone on the call. I totally can see, and it's apparent to me, the genuine concern and empathy that folks have for their New Yorkers and people in need. And I really appreciate that. And even obviously, even what we're talking about, even if it's not hitting the right way or if there are issues with it, I do appreciate the tenor of the conversation, how we're having it. And I promise that we'll always certainly come back to the table and try to continue to have these kinds of conversations. And certainly, of course, are open to having a conversation with the larger public also as well. So, when the time is right, we're certainly not trying to duck that.
We had about 600 people streaming. So you
great.
Well, out there, they've been writing questions.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone that's
No, I like to just,
yeah, go ahead, Lori.
I just have two things that I wanted to say. One, for the public's sake, 2019, this property was bought by 156 Bay 29th LLC, and it was just sold on December 23rd to Superior Globe LLC for $4 million. So I'm going to assume that Superior Globe LLC is your developer. That would make sense.
Well, they're going to get back to us because.
Okay, just to say that it's right. It's just that it is public knowledge. It's out there. The second thing I want to say is that I researched this, and Community Board 11 covers parts of community school districts 20 and 21. We have approximately 1,200 homeless children. Bill mentioned this earlier, and this is what our community needs, is to take care of the families that are in transient hotels or wherever they are, in shelters. But 1,200 children who are homeless at this point, that is the community's needs.
And then they can still go to their schools and still, we're not taking them from another community and bringing them in. They could still stay where they grew up, still see their friends, still see where they play. I mean, this has always been the concept, even in the city, when they revised foster care. I mean, just to move it to something else. When they put foster children into foster homes, okay, it used to be whatever the home is. So they could take a kid from the Bronx, they put him out in Staten Island, the kid thought he was in another planet. Now they try to keep those children, if they could, in their own CD, but at least in their own community. So, so it's something for us to think about. I don't want to belabor the point. Everybody's got a busy schedule. I think it was a fruitful discussion, and you guys have some homework to do. So once you feel that you got all your ducks in order, ICL and DHS, let us know. You can get back to Marnie, and we'll put something together again, and everybody will hear it at the same time.
Okay. Alrighty? Thank you so much. All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a terrific day. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, all.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao.
All right.
Thank
Stay
you.
well. All right. Have a good day.